Hello and welcome to the AVForums podcast for Monday the 15th of October, and joining me on this edition, Steve Withers.
Maybe I ought to get another room.
Ed Selley.
This is the best joke ever, a joke on the children.
And Mark Botwright.
It's almost time, kids.
Welcome back to the podcast. Second week since we've been back from the holidays. I think we can calm down a little bit now. We've got plenty of time to discuss what we need to discuss. I've just been reading Twitter. Just been sent a tweet saying, "Phil, why do you always apologise for going on too long? I get depressed when I hear and on that bombshell. The longer the better." Thank you very much for that tweet, King.
In other made-up tweets.
Something we forgot to mention last week because we were just too darn busy was the passing of Mr. Kurtz, Mr. Gary Kurtz, who, for those that don't know, was the producer on the original Star Wars films. And Steve knows far more about him than I do. I just know the name, and I'm looking at a poster and his name's there as produced by. I can't say I knew anything about the guy, to be honest, but it's always sad when someone passes.
Yeah, no, I think he's one of those unsung heroes of Star Wars, to be honest. Obviously you got to give credit where credit's due to George Lucas, but Gary Kurtz was his producer. He produced American Graffiti with George Lucas. They set up the Star Wars Corporation, and he did a lot of the work involved in getting Star Wars set up and financed. And he produced Star Wars, and of course he also produced The Empire Strikes Back. And for those of you who, like me, consider The Empire Strikes Back to be the best Star Wars film, it's probably worth remembering that The Empire Strikes Back was written by Lawrence Kasdan, directed by Irvin Kershner, and produced by Gary Kurtz. It's the film that George Lucas had the least involvement in. So I think his influence over the early Star Wars films is definitely, is very real. Yes, their relationship fell apart after Empire because it went massively over budget. And famously, Lucas was quoted as saying it didn't need to be that good. Because I think, no, seriously, because Kurtz and Kershner, and to a certain extent Lawrence Kasdan, set out to make the best film they possibly could. And perhaps they went, no expense spared was definitely their motto. And they did have various issues. I mean, it was a complicated film, a big film. Shooting against white backgrounds when you're using optical mats is never going to be easy. Shooting in Norway in the snow, having to build the bog planet and shooting with what was effectively a Muppet, but making it look as realistic as possible. All those things added to the cost and the time to make the film. And of course, Lucas was financing it himself. And when they went over budget, he had to go and beg for money from one of the banks, and he never forgave Kurtz for that. So what you end up with is Return of the Jedi, which was produced by a guy called Howard Kazanjian, who was basically just a yes man who was there to keep things on schedule and as cheap as possible, and that shows in the film. Jedi looks cheap compared to Star Wars and particularly Empire, and unfortunately, I think the loss of Kurtz, who was definitely more interested in making Empire is a very it's not just aimed at children. I think it's for all ages, and it is quite adult in its tone. He resisted Lucas's desire to make this next film more kid-friendly, and that's one of the reasons also why they parted company.
Did he do anything? Did he do anything other than Star Wars and Empire?
Yeah, he did. He did The Dark Crystal for a start.
Okay.
Responsible for all my childhood nightmares. He did Return to Oz as well, which was the other half of my childhood nightmares.
Yeah. And a film called Slipstream, which I don't think is well known.
That's really peculiar. It's the only cinematic appearance of the Shorts Optica light aircraft. If you wanted something really pointless.
Now that's good quiz knowledge.
Yeah, I know.
Right. So anyway, Gary Kurtz, he's passed on.
Yes.
Steve could talk for hours on any subject. Never mind Star Wars. So we'll leave it at that point. But yes, rest in peace. It's sad to see him pass, and two the most influential films in my life as well. He was a part of that. So there we go. Right, let's move on.
Phil, I've got a Star Wars poster in front of my desk, and I'm playing Deadpool on it at the moment, seeing who's going to go next. The names on that poster are gradually getting ticked off. Like Alec Guinness dead, Peter Cushing dead.
Yeah, well,
Carrie Fisher dead, Gary Kurtz dead.
Around me at the moment are proper posters that are framed. So above the fireplace is Blade Runner. To the right of that is Star Wars. To the right of that is Pulp Fiction. To the right of me is Empire Strikes Back. And in the hallway, above the stairs, and not in your eye line, is Return of the Jedi.
I've got Jedi and Empire original posters actually framed, but I've just stuffed them in a cupboard out of the way.
Yeah, no, these are originals and they're framed, and they've been with me for about 25 years now. But anyway, we're way off subject. Ed, what have you been up to this week?
I've been working. Tedious, lots and lots of work, which is bad for the soul.
Yeah, but your idea of work is other people's idea of heaven. So
there is the writing bit, and
it's all relative.
I'm with you there, actually. Yeah, the writing bit.
Other than that, I did make a particularly cracking batch of spinach and potato soup earlier in the week, and on Wednesday I had some left over, and I dropped a soft-boiled egg into a bowl of it, and frankly, it was greatness, and it cost buttons. So yeah, that was possibly the highlight of my week, which is all you need to know.
Soup season is here. I've made 3 different soups this week, all homemade. Haven't done the spinach one. I might try that one. Yeah, I quite like that kind of thing. But yeah, it's definitely comfort food season is definitely back in, which I am struggling with at the minute to try and not eat too much in terms of carbohydrates.
Count carrot and lentil at the weekend, I think. Right. It's a benefit of living alone. I'll probably fart like a trooper. So
yeah, you get to heat your own house.
Mm-hmm. You jest, but actually, if you cook a big tureen of the stuff, the amount of heat it emits warms the kitchen up really nicely. So yeah, win-win.
And you're trying your Carolina Reaper curry.
Hopefully, yes. It depends. I'm meeting up with my parents on Saturday, which is always pleasant.
And if I have to them,
no. If I have a large pub lunch, I'm not going to eat another large meal in the evening because that would just be gluttony. So the Reaper would be. I do, according to the best before, have until 2022 to eat it. So,
well, it is from Iceland.
It is from Iceland.
And for those international listeners, Iceland is a grocery store, a frozen grocery store in
as
the
well
UK,
as a country.
Not the country. Somebody got mixed up on that last week.
So yes, but no. Other than that, it's all good. I've got some exciting products to review for you guys. They're all in attendance. I actually need to update the little log system that we use, so Phil actually knows what they are, but I'll get around to that in the fullness of time. All going swimmingly.
Okay, Mark.
Did another pub quiz last night.
Okay, did you win?
Came second, which I think a team of 3 against largely kind of teams of 4 and 5. I think that'll do.
Do you not think sometimes that the larger teams trip over themselves because of disagreements?
Yes, you can see who are the dominant figures and who just after every kind of answer is called out, someone says, "I told you,"
But, I find that annoying though when they get these massive teams and you've only got a couple of mates. Then you're always at a disadvantage.
That's just your life, Steve.
Plus, there's far too much cheating goes on these days. People are always whipping out their phones and stuff. It really annoys me.
Yeah, that's the thing. Back when I did pub quizzes and that kind of thing, the mobile phone wasn't around. You only had text messages. You couldn't get the internet and stuff like that. So has that actually ruined it? Because I haven't done a pub quiz since the internet came on.
Can we be clear about this? It's just down to poor pub protocol.
Yeah,
because the pub quiz I attended where I am now, phones are placed in Tupperwares. And they're in the center of the table. There is no consultation.
When I'm playing, if I see a phone coming out, I report them to the
Nobody likes a grass.
Yeah,
snitches get stitches.
I don't care. I'm not having it. Particularly when it's the film section. There's no one's beating me at the film section, and even if they use a phone, I'm still going to beat them. So.
Okay. Question for you then, Steve. Let's test your knowledge here. What is IMAX enhanced?
What is that's a good question because I've been looking at it this week after you asked me about doing an article about it, and as far as I can work out, it's a load of cobblers. But interestingly, I did notice. Well, yeah, it's like what it's not as though they're doing anything. I guess it looks like it's their version of THX. Now THX has kind of like gone by the wayside and has become a bit of a joke. I think IMAX Enhanced is meant to be their level of quality control. But I did notice that this morning they announced the first IMAX Enhanced 4K disc.
Yes, it's an enhancement on the open source HDR10, seemingly.
Yeah, so I am going to order that disc. But yeah, because if you look at the website, it's pretty vague, and it says about parts and this sort of stuff. And you think, what are the partners doing then, and who are the partners? And I know Denon and Marantz are involved in them, and I've got the Denon AV moment. And I got an email from Roger Batchelor, funny enough, straight after we had that conversation last Friday, just letting me know that it was going to be added in the. But I still don't know. That was what he said. We're going to be adding IMAX Enhanced with a firmware update next year, and I'm like, yeah, but what is it? so at this moment,
think to reply going, yeah, but what is it?
Yeah, I did actually reply to him to say, yeah, but what is it? He hasn't answered to me. So my initial thoughts are that it smacks a bit of marketing, but there may be more to it. But they're being a bit vague in terms of the details at the moment. But we'll see. It's interesting, but they are being a bit cagey on the details at the moment.
Yeah. And obviously the reason I'm asking that question, just to bring the listeners up to speed, is this thing has been announced and it is so vague that I basically said to Steve, go and tell me what it is, please, and write an article. And he's had a week at it, and we're still nowhere clear. So if anybody represents IMAX Enhanced and they want to come on the podcast and tell us all about it, get in touch. Let's talk about it. Right, competitions before we move on to hardware. Mark, what we got?
We can win a copy of Deadpool 2 on 4K Ultra HD Blu-ray, and that one closed on the 18th of October. We've also got a copy of Eureka October Horror box set on Blu-ray, and that one closed on the 18th of October as well. We've also got the PlayStation 4 1TB console with FIFA 19, a DualShock controller, and a Sony PlayStation wireless stereo headset. That one's courtesy of Smith's Toys Superstore, and you've got until Halloween, until 31st of October for that one. And as ever, all competitions open to eligible AVForums members resident in the UK.
Okay, and any previous winners?
Yes, indeed. Buster Benny 2001 won Gotti on Blu-ray, and 1961 Who Killed Teddy Bear on Blu-ray.
Okay, excellent stuff. So some really good competition prizes in there. Get yourselves entering. We'll be back in a sec with hardware news. Okay, so moving on to hardware news and reviews. Well, we haven't really got any. Well, Ed's got one review, so we've got one review this week. So Ed's going to review something. It's been more a case of stuff arriving for review, and Steve's been out and had a look at something that's not coming for review as far as we're aware at the minute, or certainly it's not being handed out to reviewers. So let's go to that one first, Steve, because it's a TV that caused a lot of interest at IFA. We had a behind closed doors demonstration of it. It's the Q900 from Samsung. Mm-hmm. It's a 8K TV. Now, there's been lots of talk on the forums, or let's talk in our podcast about what is 8K, do we really need it? We haven't really got 4K yet, and so on. But this TV's coming to market. You went out and had a look at the 85-inch version of it. I think the important thing here is that you were given some hands-on time with it, but it was at Samsung's facility.
Yeah, I mean,
there won't be a review of it.
We don't, as a policy, review things at third-party locations.
No.
In Samsung's defence, I will say that they gave me an entire day with it. They left me alone. I could do whatever I wanted. I brought all my equipment with me, and I did give it a thorough testing. But obviously, the one thing you can't do in a situation like that is live with the TV for a week or so and actually use it at home and set it up in the way you would if you were doing a full review. Now, there's a couple of reasons for going to them to see the TV, but one of them was obviously I was reviewing the 85-inch Q900, which is massive, and I think in practical terms they couldn't send that out for review. However, the range does consist of three different sizes: the 65, 75, and 85. And I've got to say, much to my surprise, the pricing was quite competitive. I mean, the 65-inch Q900 is $4,999, which for an 8K TV, when you consider the price premium on 4K TVs when they were first launched, is actually pretty good, I think. And the 75-inch, which is probably the sweet spot for a lot of people, if you're looking for a really big screen TV, is $6,999, which again, for a 75-inch TV, is actually pretty competitive. The 85-inch is $14,999. Obviously, there's a big price differential for that screen size. But I think the 65 and particularly the 75 is very interesting because that's not an extortionate amount of money for a screen of that size when you consider what you're getting. So that's good.
Now, this is based on the Q9 in terms of the backlight. So the Q9FN, it's the same backlight with the same number of zones, isn't it?
It's got the same number of zones. I think it might be using a different power supply because it can drive a lot brighter than the Q900. But yes, the number of zones is the same. Now, Samsung never officially said how many zones are on the Q900, but I know from counting them it's 488. So that would suggest that this has also got just under 500 zones on the TV. But the number of zones isn't necessarily everything. As I discovered with the Hisense Q9A, that had 1,000 zones. But Samsung implementation of the local dimming algorithm is vastly superior. And this is the case again with this TV. I think they're. I mean, I've also just recently seen the LG SK9 500 has less zones, and its implementation of local dimming is appalling compared to Samsung. Samsung obviously have invested a lot more money in this because they got a lot more invested in LCD as technology. So their local dimming, I have to say, is really impressive. You've seen the Q9, haven't you?
Well, yeah, I'm living with one at the minute. Well, I say I'm living with one. It's been on the TV stand for about a week, and we'll come on to it because things just keep arriving for review. So, but yes, it is impressive, but also it's very aggressive, and there is some content where the two just don't work together, and I'm thinking like Starfields and that kind of thing. Where
I point this out to the guys that because I used my gravity disc. It was a great test. The one where she's tumbling into space, and there's a fantastic shot where she's just gradually starting to stop tumbling, and there's suddenly it's just her, and she moves into darkness, and all you can see behind her is the Milky Way. It's a very tough scene for any local dimming system to deliver well, and it does do it well. But what it was doing, it was still, and this is in the movie mode particularly, there was still a bit of crush in Starfield, where if you switched it into, say, standard mode, suddenly all those stars were there again. So there was a little bit too much. And I pointed out to them, I said, look, you're being a little bit too aggressive in the movie mode. Obviously, they're trying to deliver those deep blacks for movie mode, but in the process, they are still being a little bit aggressive there. And there's still a little bit of time to tweak before it actually hits the shop. So they said they're going to work on that and tweak the just above black detail, particularly in the movie mode. But what I will say is, obviously, as a TV, it's their flagship, so it includes all the things you'd expect to see on a Samsung flagship TV. So if you use the Q9 as an example, it's got the One Connect box as well. This one is about the size of a shoebox. It's even bigger.
I was going to say they should call it the One Connect brick because that's what it is.
Oh, the new one is even bigger.
Is it? Okay.
It's absolutely massive. I guess because it's got so much processing power inside that they need to keep it cool.
Yeah.
Now, as it stands at the moment, the box the TV will come with, HDMI, it's got 4 HDMI inputs, but HDMI 1 will support 8K up to 30p. Once HDMI 2.1 is available, which will be next year, then they will make an upgrade available to owners, I believe free of charge. They said they would, on request, they would switch the box around for one with HDMI 2.1. And now you could say, do you need HDMI 2.1 when there's no 8K content anyway? But obviously HDMI 2.1 has other benefits as well, things like high frame rate, which the TV can support. So if you want other things, it already supports variable refresh rate, but there's enhanced ARC as well, and obviously dynamic metadata. So HDMI 2.1 has other benefits other than just 8K. But what it does mean is that the TV could, if such a source was available, accept 8K at up to 60 frames per second with a replacement box. Now, of course, the issue that's been getting a lot of the headlines is the fact that they're launching an 8K TV when there is absolutely no 8K content, and that is absolutely true. There's no getting around that fact. There isn't any 8K content. There isn't going to be for a while, for quite a long while, I suspect. However, I think what they've done is said, okay, we accept that fact, but we're trying to deliver the best possible TV we can right now using all the technology available to us. So like I said, it's got the One Connect box, it's got the single fiber optic cable that leads to the TV with the power and everything, which is great. It includes the smart platform, which is really good. So it's got all those features, all the video catch-up services, the video streaming services, all that kind of stuff's in there. Set it up with your mobile phone if you want to. It's got the ambient mode. So it's got all the bells and whistles that the Samsung currently offer. It's got the 8K processing, so it's got what they call the quantum 8K processor, which is the one with artificial intelligence. So what they do is they analyze millions and millions of different images, and the learning algorithms within the program basically improve the processing over time. Now, that's not done in the TV. That's done at Samsung, but what they do is then they update the database on a regular basis on the TV so that then it can improve the upscaling particularly. And obviously they've got more pixels to play with, 38 million pixels to play with. I've got to say that in comparisons with a 4K image on a 4K, the same image on a 4K TV and this TV, the processing did work really well. It looked fantastic. But where they've really gone to town is with HDR. Now, the model that I tested could deliver over 3,000 nits of peak brightness in dynamic mode and 2,700 in movie mode. But that's not the finished article. They said that by the time it actually streets, the ones that are going to be shipping to retailers, that will be able to deliver 5,000 nits of peak brightness in dynamic mode and 4,000 nits in an accurate movie mode, and also 100% DCI-P3, which basically means this is the first TV commercially available, not counting stuff like the Pulsar, that can deliver a 4,000 nit HDR grade without having to rely on tone mapping, which is obviously gives them a certain degree of bragging rights as far as that goes.
Yeah, so there's bragging rights, but actually we discussed this last week and obviously in previous weeks as well, is that a lot of this content, it's only being graded at 1,000 nits. It's still being graded in rooms where a lot of the content is actually being graded at 120 nits, and a lot of the peak highlights that are in content is around about 600 to 800 nits. So it kind of calls into question, why would you need a 4,000 nit TV? And it's not all about how bright the whole screen is. It's about these specular highlights. Are we getting ahead of ourselves here? And is it causing confusion? Because I think it is, actually. I think it's causing a lot of confusion.
I don't know if it's causing confusion. I think, if you can deliver a TV that can do that, then why not? But you're right. A lot of the content people are watching isn't going to be graded at 4,000 nits. So there's plenty that is. But a lot of it is graded at 1,000 nits, yeah, and they don't even use the full range available to them anyway.
Yeah, so it's graded within a 1,000 nit envelope or a 4,000 nit envelope. That doesn't mean that the specular highlights are 4,000 nits. No. It just means that is the envelope in which they have graded that movie. It doesn't mean that the peak highlights will be anywhere close to 4,000 nit.
No, absolutely. But I guess, and we can both testify to how good HDR looks on an OLED TV, which hasn't got anywhere near that kind of brightness. 800 nits is the best you're going to get out of an OLED. But, it still delivers a fantastic performance because obviously they've got the deep blacks, they've got the precise, pixel level specular highlights, and that makes a big difference. But at the same time, I have to say that the HDR content that I was watching looked absolutely spectacular on this TV. Things like Blade Runner 2049, for example, which is a 4,000 nit grade, looked amazing. So because the TV can deliver that color volume if it's being used, and I guess the idea that you can watch something without having to worry about it being compromised in any way is appealing. And it certainly, like I said, it gives the TV a degree of bragging rights over any other current model. Be interesting to see where the ZF9 measures up when it gets released.
Yeah,
Steve, you're just missing the critical point here. What does it look like with deja vu?
well, actually, this is the question.
That's a good point.
This is the big question. So let's ask the big question, Steve, because I've seen this TV. I saw it at IFA with you. You've spent the whole day with it now and had time to play about with it with content that and not just demo content that we had at IFA and so on. So I guess the main question is why, and does it live up to the hype, and is it something that you would go with 8K, or is it just too early?
I think the 8K aspect is probably the least. I mean, there is no 8K content. There ain't going to be for a long time. So if you're buying an 8K TV, you're really doing it to basically brag to your mates. So would I need an 8K TV right now? No, of course not. Would I be happy if I had the 75-inch sitting in the lounge, other than obviously my wife moaning at me about the size of it? Yes, I would be very happy. I think it was a cracking TV. Certainly, I think what Samsung have done is they've delivered, and I guess this might be the last iteration of it, the best LCD TV they've ever made. I mean, they've basically chucked in everything but the kitchen sink. This is the apex of LCD televisions. And if the rumours are to be believed, next year we might see a completely different technology coming along, which will replace it. But if this is the last hurrah of LCD TVs, they've really delivered the best possible picture you can get out of LCD television in terms of effective local dimming, color accuracy, better viewing angles. I've got to say the viewing angles definitely were improved on this TV from previous generations of LCD TVs that I've tested, and obviously delivering the biggest HDR numbers they could possibly deliver. It ticks those boxes. Do I need an 8K television right now? No, of course not. Would I be happy if I had one? Yeah, I think I would be pretty happy with it, actually. I do think the HDR did look incredible.
Would you pay for it, though, with your own money?
No, I wouldn't.
That's the real question. I think what Samsung are doing is impressive. I think the technology is impressive. I sat through the demo, I sat through the explanations of what they're doing with machine learning and all that kind of thing, and AI and video processing and so on. And for video content and for sports content and all that kind of thing, I can see where it has legs. I can see where this is really going to help with higher frame rate material. Yes, the HDR performance as well, that's impressive that it can get 4,000 nits. Although the content, some will argue that the content doesn't really need it, but they've done it, they've managed to get those numbers. That's impressive. I think the problem people have at the minute is the fact that I think there's two camps, definitely two camps. There's the one camp that likes what Samsung's doing, will buy Samsung product, and even though it's 8K and there's no 8K content, they will go out and buy this. The other camp, I would say, are more AVForums members and listeners to the podcast, are a little bit more cynical when they look at these things. Because we've had such a ramp up of technology recently, from full HD, then to 4K, and now we're getting 8K before 4K has really sort of bedded itself in, and before it's really sort of made any impact in terms of broadcast and all the rest of it. I think there's going to be the cynical view, and the other thing is the QLED name. I think there's a lot of cynicism around that as well, because it's so close to OLED, and Samsung don't do OLED, and I think you've got your split there as well, where you have your OLED fans and those that think Samsung are being a little bit disingenuous. I guess what I'm trying to say is Samsung, it's a really, really impressive stuff, really impressive, but I think it's maybe just a little bit too early, and to get the enthusiasts on board, I think it's going to take a little bit longer than maybe they're hoping. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong with that viewpoint.
Yeah, no. I mean, let's be honest. They don't do OLED, as you said, and the technology they want to do isn't ready yet. So they've got to do something in the meantime to keep people buying TVs, to keep their presence, to keep their so they're still seen in the marketplace. And things like 8K and QLED achieve that goal. They're pushing the envelope technologically, no question about it.
Absolutely.
They're showing what they're capable of doing. But at the same time, this is kind of a holding pattern. And the last couple of years really have been that for them to a certain extent.
Yeah.
But it will trickle down. I mean, it will trickle down into lower level. You'll see the processing in the 4K models next year, I'm sure. So that'll be good. And if everything goes to plan, you're going to see a lot of this technology also being applied to micro LED when that eventually comes as a product.
And that's the one I think we're all excited about.
Theoretically, it's a game changer.
Yeah.
No question about it. I think the funny thing is that we've always been saying for years now, ever since 4K came along, and then people started talking about HDR, that it wasn't about more pixels, it was about better pixels.
Yeah, absolutely.
And ironically, the Q900 proves the point, because what impressed me the most wasn't the number of pixels, but actually was the HDR.
Yeah, but there is something to be said about pixel density, Steve, and that was one thing I really noticed from the demo that we did have at IFA, and obviously you've spent a bit more time with the TV, is it does make a difference having all those pixels to play with.
Absolutely does. I mean, particularly on very big screen sizes, which is obviously where we're moving to. I mean, the average screen size is getting bigger and bigger. So whilst right now 75 inches might seem like a ridiculous size, it's becoming more popular. And you're right, all those pixels to play with, even though the footage, looking at the footage on a 4K TV next to the 8K TV, it's the same feed, same 4K feed. That it can't add things that aren't there, and yet it does look sharper. It does look more detailed. So when that processing is applied and those pixels are used effectively, it can look really impressive, and that's certainly the case with the Q900. So I think one of the things Samsung's very keen to stress, because they know full well there's no 8K content, is look at the processing. This is really good, and it is really good. So yeah, I mean, would I personally spend like $7,000 on a 75-inch Q900? No. But if you've got the money and you want to brag to your mates, it's certainly worth considering. Just as a quick little aside, the 65-inch version is 3,000 nits of peak brightness, not 4,000 nits of peak brightness, apparently.
Cool, good stuff. Hopefully, we'll try and get one in for review. We'll try and get 65 in for review if we can. Not really sure what Samsung are doing with these. Obviously, they've invited people in to look at them ahead of time, which is why you were there, Steve, because they can't send the 85-inch out for review. It's just practical terms. It would get smashed within a week, I would have thought.
Most people's front doors.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. So talking about fitting things through the doors and that kind of thing. So I've had two TVs turn up at the same time. Now, they weren't supposed to turn up at the same time, but as couriers do, the one courier that was supposed to be bringing the Sony AF9 up to me turned up to collect the LG, but forgot to put the Sony in the van when they did that. So the Sony turned up 2 days late. So I actually had the Sony AF9 and the Philips 803 OLED TVs turn up on the same day. The Philips is a 65-inch. I've forgotten how big 65 inches look in my room. It makes the 55s look tiny. So I've got the AF9 sitting next to the 55-inch Philips at the minute. I've only just managed to get both of them up and running, really. And I was going to talk about my first thoughts and all the rest of it on these TVs, but I really haven't had time to actually sit down and spend any reasonable time, because the first thing I noticed was an issue with the Philips, and of course I started panicking because what I did was I went straight into YouTube and started watching content on YouTube, and the audio was terrible. It was rattling the entire chassis of the TV, so I started panicking, thinking, oh no, it's been damaged in transit and all the rest of it. But actually, when I actually sat down yesterday and spent some time with it, it's just YouTube. It's just the app on YouTube. For some reason, it's boosting the audio, and it sounds terrible. Everything else works fine. So, phew. I thought it was an issue. It wasn't. And then I set the Sony up. Build quality, absolutely brilliant on the Sony. Really good build quality. Obviously, it sits on that easel stand, Steve. The lean back, I thought that might have been an issue. No, you don't notice it when you're sitting looking at it dead on. You don't notice that it's actually leaning back a little bit. So yeah, I'm impressed with both of them so far. They're both OLED TVs. I've had them running side by side, just in out-of-the-box settings. I would say the Sony is a lot more accurate out-of-the-box in its cinema mode. It looks more accurate than the Philips. The one thing I will say about the Philips 803, and this is the first Philips TV I've had in about 4 years, because you've done the majority of the reviews for the Philips in the past, Steve. This is the first one. It's certainly the first one I've had. Anyway, it was a long time ago, so it's the first one I've had for a while. My God, that menu system is a nightmare.
Yeah.
You know, it's, and you can tell, and obviously Mr. Danny Tak is an absolute picture guru when it comes to processing and all the rest of it, and motion processing, picture processing, sharpening algorithms, all that kind of thing. He knows what he's doing. Having so many different options within the menu system, and at the end of the day, you know, myself,
which you turn off.
You and I see loads of TVs and loads of menu systems, and you start getting used to them quite quickly, and you forget that for the consumer just how daunting the menu system can be. And unfortunately, TVs nowadays, they all turn up with everything more or less switched on. Now, what I will say in Philips' case is that their vivid mode is not as bad as anybody else's vivid mode, because they've actually made an effort of, they're not going to burn your retinas, but everything is switched on when you switch these TVs on. And if I was a consumer, I think personally I would be lost in that menu system, because it is not intuitive.
They also use some, I can best describe as some unusual nomenclature.
Yeah. Because
the what we would normally just call contrast, I think they call video contrast. There's a couple of, and some of them are hidden away. It's not an intuitive menu system by any stretch of the imagination.
Yeah. So, but anyway, it's a nice looking TV. They've spent some time on it. The design's really nice. I really like the design. I like the fact it sits on those little feet. So yeah, it's a cracker TV. Quickly on the Sony, same thing. Far faster with Android.
That's good.
Compared to the AF8, and I did live with the AF8 for some time. It's now gone. We sold that one on now. I've done the long-term testing with it. There wasn't anything else to add to it. It improved with firmware updates. I'll quickly update the review probably next week, just with the findings on the final thing. The AF9, a lot faster. Really noticeable. No lag, no hanging around. And the same with the Philips, actually. The new,
which is also Android, of course, isn't it?
Which is Android. So they both use the Android system, and I've got to say both of them have actually been a pleasure to use. Obviously, the Philips is a little bit buggy with the YouTube app, but that's not Philips' issue. It's YouTube's app.
I think it's Philips slightly one generation ahead of Sony in terms of the...
I would have to look at it a bit closer, because like I say, I've only just switched them on and played about with them to start with. I haven't done anything in depth. But yeah, I will put them side by side, and I'll obviously check the versions that they're running as well. But I think it certainly has a slightly different design, so it could be running.
Yeah, I got a sneaking suspicion the Philips may be slightly ahead of Sony in terms of development, because I think they've been working closely with Google.
Yeah, but I've got to say, Sony lightning fast, and the good thing is there's a full CMS in here now.
Hey, only took them what, decade?
Yeah, but it's just something that needed to be there. But I've got to say, out of the box, and I haven't put the measurement gear anywhere close to it, but I've got to say it did look really quite nice out of the box. I watched a bit of Ready Player One in HDR, and it looked really nice in their out of the box setting. So I'm expecting good things from both TVs, to be honest, and the reviews should be up within the next week or so, because I need to rush these ones through. Not as in we'll rush the reviews, but in terms of they will appear on the forums a lot quicker than other TVs have. Recently, it's just because we're getting towards the end of the year and people will be making their decisions, and obviously we need to do our editor's choice. So each of the reviewers, they put forward their recommendations for products of the year. That will happen in November, end of November. But yeah, that's what I've been looking at. So stay tuned for those reviews. Some really nice TVs that are coming along. So Steve's seen the Q900, been impressed. And I've got to say, so far with the Sony AF9 and the Philips 803. And the only difference between the 803 and the 903 is a soundbar. There's no physical differences anywhere else on the TV. So yeah. Looking forward to reviewing those over the next week or so. Right, so we're going to go Ed for some audio, because we've been audio light this week. So what have you been looking at, Ed?
Right, next thing going up for you guys is the Fyne Audio F301. And in this world of 8K televisions and expensive bloody OLEDs, this is a £250 bookshelf loudspeaker. And you might, at me saying that, go, well, do we really need another £250 bookshelf loudspeaker? We've got, excellent products already from Q Acoustics, Acoustic Energy, Mission, so on and so forth. Fyne Audio is a new company, but it is not comprised of new people, if you will. Almost everyone that has any major role in it has already served a considerable length of time in industry, including from another Scottish-based loudspeaker company that begins with T. The result of this is a product which, in some regards, it feels a bit like a greatest hits, because you look at it and you think, oh, well, some of those styling details are from there or from there, but actually as a whole, you look at the product and you think, that's quite smart. And for £250, it is beautifully assembled. But the best thing to do is not just sit there and look at them, it's to sit there and listen to them. It's a genuinely very satisfying loudspeaker to listen to long term. I mean, to put it into perspective, if you take, obviously the process of evaluating loudspeakers is slightly different to the televisions. I don't get out the terrifying measurement gear and start working out test patterns. But if you work on the principle that I can do a full critical listening program in a little over a day, I didn't rush to get these back in the box. They stayed out, and I continued to listen to them. And to do so for my own enjoyment rather than to tell you what they actually do. And that's not always a given with £250 products. And the fact that they've made it sound nice and look nice and then also assembled it beautifully is fairly impressive. And it has to be said, at the moment I am out of the game for multi-channel reviews. I physically can't fit them into the grounding annex. But I suspect that there is a matching centre speaker, and I suspect that this will probably be the basis of a very, very capable and affordable multi-channel system, if you were so inclined as well. All of the basics are there. The behavior and relationship between the main driver and the tweeter is entirely cohesive, entirely linear. The dispersion is good, and they are pretty tonally accurate for an affordable speaker. So in terms of AV performance, where there are, if you like, more benchmarks than the business of simply kicking back and listening to music, I think they're going to do a very good job there. Obviously, we've talked for a long period of time already, so unless you have any specific questions, the review is going to go up, and I think it covers all of the basics. Whether we need another speaker brand is open to question, but it's a very, very good new arrival, and if you are looking at speakers at that price point, you do need to check them out.
Ed, one thing that I particularly noticed at that price point when I was reviewing stuff a good few years ago now, was the trying to get a stereo image at this price point, because of dispersion and all the rest of it, because of the drivers that have to be used at those price points. you were using what I would describe as excessive towing sometimes to get a decent image at the listening position. Have things moved on at that price point?
A little bit. There are physical limits to what a small box, usually narrow at the front and comparatively deep, can do. There's no substitute for building everything in the shape and size of the Tannoy Legacy Eaton. I mean, it might look like it escaped from the set of Dad's Army, but it works beautifully. There's some clever stuff at work with what Fyne Audio have done here. In particular, it always used to, the most directional part of what you're referring to always used to be tweeter dispersion. It's hard to do. If you look at a lot of speakers, the Fyne Audio is no exception, but if you look at what Acoustic Energy is doing and so on and so forth, this process of placing the tweeter in a shallow sort of aperture creates it does an awful lot for creating soundstage. You would still, I mean, I still ran them with a little bit of toe in, and I would suggest in most domestic situations you'll want to do that, and that will create a very definite sweet spot. But it is something that has improved in the last decade or so, and sooner or later, the moment that we remember that there is, that there are definite benefits to wider baffle, shallower cabinet loudspeakers, and we accept the fact that yes, they look a bit old-fashioned, but deal with it, things will improve further.
Right, so the review will be up soon. If that's of interest to you, obviously go and read it. And that's it for hardware this week. We'll be back in a sec with movie news. Okay, so movie news. No reviews this week. I was going to try and get to the cinema this week, and it's just been almost a week from hell. I just haven't had time to do anything. I really wanted to go and see a couple of things that are on at the moment, and unfortunately that's not been the case. But I am going this evening, Steve. I'm going to go and see First Man tonight. Haven't decided if it's IMAX or not. Haven't booked my ticket yet. But then there's only me, so I can normally squeeze in somewhere if it's a busy screening. But certainly going to go and see it after I've been to have the car service this afternoon. Ed talking about £250 speakers. That's a service these days. That puts it in the context. So are you going to go and see it?
Yeah, I am. I've booked tickets for unfortunately for me, the nearest IMAX screen is in Cardiff. So I'm off to Cardiff on Wednesday night to see it in IMAX. Although I've got to say, I mean, God bless the Welsh. A normal ticket in my Odeon in Bath is like £12, whereas the IMAX ticket in Cardiff, in the Odeon in Cardiff, was like nine quid. So they're bloody expensive in Bath.
Is it a proper IMAX screen though?
Well, I don't know. It's hard to tell because it just says IMAX screen on the thing, but right. It's going to be better than the Odeon in Bath. I can tell you that much.
And how far is that for you to travel?
It's not too bad. It's 45 minutes.
All right. Oh, that's not too bad. That's not too bad. Oh, right.
It's just down the M4, basically. Across the bridge and you're in Cardiff.
Right, okay. So we're both going to go see that tonight. Obviously, we're recording this on Friday, so we will be just talking about that a week later on the podcast. So if you're interested in a week late review, then tune in for that one. This week, if there's things that we could go and see at the cinema, I know one of them has been hyped to hell, running loads of advertising and loads of promotion, because I think it's going to be a complete and utter stinker.
You mean Halloween?
No, I meant Hunter Killer.
Oh, Hunter Killer. Right, okay, let's start with that one, because I've seen the trailer for it. I mean, it's like Gary Oldman obviously did this before he got an Oscar. Gerard Butler needs to get himself a new agent, because he's just done one shit film after another ever since 300. But to be perfectly honest, these days, if I see Gerard Butler's face, I just know it's going to be a crap film. Yeah. No offense, I'm sure he's a very nice man, but my God, he makes some rubbish.
To be honest, Gary Oldman's not exactly a symbol of quality anymore. It's kind of, it's either very good or it's absolutely awful, and there's nothing in between with him anymore.
Yeah, that's true. I don't know about anybody else, but I saw the trailer and thought, I'm not going to go and see that.
It's a shame, because it's time for a good submarine movie, but this obviously isn't it.
Aren't they doing a remake of Das Boot? So
I don't need a remake of something. It's one of those. It's a very distinctive environment for films, because the claustrophobia of it and so on and so forth. And on occasions, it's been done very well. I mean, Das Boot did it better than anyone. But then it's just been a cavalcade of shite. I mean, if we ignore the fact that The Hunt for Red October is brilliant in part because of its terribleness, Scottish Soviet submarine captains and other exciting points, then otherwise it just starts getting disappointing quite quickly. I mean, U571, yes, less said about that, the better. Crimson Tide's all right.
Yeah, I like Crimson Tide.
But in part, it's the strength of its cast that keeps it from sinking, mixing with metaphors here. And then after that, it tails off very, very quickly, doesn't it? I mean, there is some... I do remember watching a terrible film at some point, sort of a submarine cross horror film with Zach Galifianakis not being... Well, I mean, comedies are loose thing. I don't find him terribly funny at the best of times, but he was doing a serious role, and that was monumentally terrible. So I'll be interested to see if this is even worse. Not that I'm going to see it.
Well, like I say, it's been promoted everywhere. I mean, it's turned up in loads of feeds. On
the more they do that, the more you know it's a stinker, don't you?
So yeah, the more you see something, the more you know they're just trying to claw some money back and cover their costs. What else is coming out, Steve?
Right, well, appropriately, given that we're approaching the end of October, we also got Halloween, which is, despite being the same name, is a direct sequel to the original Halloween. So basically, the concept is that obviously there have been lots and lots of Halloween movies over the years, but this film is intended to be a sequel to the original Halloween. So forget Halloween 2, Halloween 3, Halloween 4, Halloween however many. This is just a direct sequel to Halloween. The concept is that Jamie Lee Curtis, who played Laurie Strode in the original film, she's spent years psychologically damaged from the events of the original film, waiting for Michael Myers to come back and preparing herself for that fact, and eventually, of course, he comes back. I've got to say, actually, I quite fancy this. I do like the fact they've kind of decided to ignore all the other stuff where the films went horribly off tangent.
Well, it went into space.
No, you're thinking of Jason. Jason went into space.
Sorry.
Jason X was in space. And Jamie Lee Curtis is always watchable. So, because she's already done one called, I think she did Halloween H2O. So that for the 20th anniversary, 20 years ago. God, she was in that one. But obviously they're ignoring all this now, and this is going to be a sequel to just Halloween. Personally, I picked up Halloween on 4K disc, the original film on 4K disc, and I'm planning to watch that on Halloween. But this does pique my interest, but I doubt I'll go to the cinema to see it because I'd rather see First Man. Also coming out is Goosebumps 2. I've got Goosebumps on Blu-ray. Had a really good Atmos soundtrack, and I really enjoyed it, actually. I didn't know much about the Goosebumps books, but I did find the film very enjoyable. Jack Black's in it, and this sequel, again, looks interesting. I'll probably pick it up on disc rather than go to the cinema. But
are they the children's books?
Yes, they're the children's books. And the first one was really good because what it did was the concept was that Jack Black's character wrote all these books, but you couldn't if you opened the original books up, the actual original drafts of the books up, it let the characters out. So they managed to cram in quite a few of the books into one film by having all them suddenly being released into the real world. And it worked really well as a concept. And like I say, it was a fun movie. It was enjoyable. It was funny. It was scary in places. It was a good kids film. So if they can manage to do that for a second time, that would be great. Also out this week is Fahrenheit 11/9, which is a new film from Michael Moore. So obviously he made Fahrenheit 9/11, which was about 9/11 and the aftermath and the Bush administration and the war on terror. This film is 11/9, so the 9th of November was the day that Trump effectively became president of the United States, or he's won the election.
I thought he'd just put the date in the correct order this time.
So this is basically his documentary about how we ended up, how America rather ended up in the situation it's currently in, how Trump ended up in power, and what to do about it. But again, I don't think any of these films are films that I would, go out to the cinema to see. They're more things you'll pick up either on disc or watch on a streaming service.
No, it seems rather apt that Fahrenheit 11/9 is coming out around Halloween, though. It's the most horrifying of them all.
Anyway, that's what's coming out of the cinema. But First Man, that's the one to go and see.
Yeah,
currently,
absolutely. Yeah. Okay.
And A Star Is Born, if you haven't got around to seeing that yet.
I haven't got around to seeing that, but yes, I'm going to try and do. There's 9 coming out that week, so I might try and fit it in that week. Right, Blu-ray releases. What can we go and buy, Steve?
Not a massive amount this week.
There's a definite on the list for me, though.
12 Monkeys.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I've got that on order. I mean, I was going to say not a lot out, but if you like 12 Monkeys, and I do, then the new Arrow release definitely is. I've already got that on order, getting that on Monday.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to that. The rest of it, though, was all pretty. You got Hurricane Heist, which I think was actually screened on Sky Movies anyway when it came out of cinema. Not that great. Basically, it looks like it's Fast and Furious to the Hurricane, isn't it? And Happy Prince, which is Rupert Everett's film about an aging Oscar Wilde, with him playing Oscar Wilde. And also, I'm not sure this has ever been on Blu-ray, but Hudson Hawk, which, if those of you who are old enough to remember, was like a massive bomb when it came out, I think in the late 80s. It was directed by Michael Lehman, who'd made Heathers, and obviously it was his big chance, big budget film with Bruce Willis when he was a big star, and it's an absolute disaster. It was by Willis, and
Willis suffered for many years after that one.
He did, quite rightly, I think, too. If you haven't read With Nails, which is the autobiography of Richard E. Grant, he's in Hudson Hawk, and there's a fantastic chapter on Hudson Hawk and the excess and the craziness of it all, and it's really, really funny. Particularly some of the demands, not just of Bruce Willis actually, but other people in the film. But basically him and Sandra Bernhard, I think, basically just were the villains, and they basically just had a good old laugh whilst everything collapsed around them. But anyway, if you fancy a laugh, probably not intentional laughs, but just laughing at it rather than with it, then Hudson Hawk is out on Blu-ray.
What was interesting, just as a weird aside, it was part of a group. At that point, there were loads and loads of game adaptations of films being done for the Amiga Mighty Games platform that it was. And weirdly, the crapper the film, the better the game that resulted from it. The Hudson Hawk computer game was actually really good. Mainly because it didn't have Bruce Willis in it, just had a tiny pixelated variant on him. But that just, and I can't remember what the other ones were at that period. But there were some other, and then having done two terrible ports of RoboCop 1 and RoboCop 2, there was a really clever full 3D take on RoboCop 3, most peculiar, and it was really good. So yeah, make of that what you will.
12 Monkeys, Steve. Obviously, Arrow have done this. They have a habit of going back to the original negative. Is that the case here? And has it been scanned at 4K?
Yeah, so 12 Monkeys is a brand new restoration from a 4K scan of the original negative, done by Arrow Films and approved by director Terry Gilliam. It's got a DTS 5.1 master audio soundtrack. There's an audio commentary from Gilliam. There's The Hamster Factor and Other Tales, which is a cracking documentary.
Yeah.
There's also some images, theatrical trailer, and more to be announced. So I don't know what else is in it because it doesn't say here, but we'll find out when it arrives on Monday. And a reversible sleeve as well.
Yeah.
Also, the first pressing includes an illustrated collector's booklet featuring new writing on the film.
Well, I mean, they picked up our disc of the year last year, didn't they, for The Thing? That was absolutely superb. So I'm really looking forward to this because it's one of my top 10 movies.
They're on a roll at the moment. They've been doing some absolutely cracking releases, Arrow. Really, really good stuff coming out. I mean, they've got. If you're a fan of the film, and I am, they've got a brilliant disc coming out in December of Waterworld, with 3 different versions of the film.
Really?
Okay. Yeah, well, they've got the theatrical cut, the extended cut that was really, it's been available before, but that was done for TV, so it had some bits cut out of it. And they've got what they call I think it's the European cut, which is the full extended cut plus all the bits that were cut out for the TV version. So that's and a documentary about the making of the film, which should be interesting because it was one of those films that had a very troubled production. So that's on order for me as well.
Yeah, it's funny that because I've just been looking at because we're going to come on to our favourite box office bombs. I was looking for that in the list and it's not there.
Not a bomb. It was a very expensive film. It cost 175 million, which is a lot more than it was originally budgeted for. But it did not bomb. It did make money back. It made its money back. Yeah, it did.
Yeah, that surprised me because I had always thought that it was a major bomb, and
it was critically panned.
I think it was critically, well received.
Yeah. Did anybody ever see the thing at Universal Studios, The Waterworld?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was brilliant. That was really good. That was fantastic. Right. So let's move on to 4K Ultra HD Blu-ray releases. Is there anything worthwhile?
There's a lot coming out this week, actually. Some of it's been out in the States for a while, but it's new for the UK at least. American Psycho, which I've actually already got. I think it's a really funny film. It nails that sort of late 80s mentality of yuppies and consumer society. The scene with the business cards is one of the funniest things I've ever seen. And I hate to say it, but I've actually thought that in meetings as well. Nice card. Yeah, no, that scene is one of the funniest things I think has ever been written, about the eggshell white with the off-centered. It's just the descriptions of the cards and stuff, pure genius. So that's well worth getting. A new transfer 4K scan of the original camera negative, so it looks stunning as well. Also got the Expendables 2. So if you're a fan of that franchise of Sylvester Stallone movies, then they're worth picking up. And better than Expendables 3, which unfortunately they screwed up the black levels on. But the first two are fine. There's also Warrior, which is quite a fun movie, with Tom Hardy and Joel Edgerton. And also another film I really like, and I've got as well, 3:10 to Yuma, which is Christian Bale and Russell Crowe. Cracking Western, actually. Really enjoyed that. So some quite good films there, if you haven't got them already, to pick up for 4K disc.
Yeah, good stuff. So that's all the discs and everything taken care of. We do have some Star Wars news. I know we started the podcast with some Star Wars chat, so we'll keep this one to the bare minimum, but it is about the live action TV series. It is coming. I saw one of the publicity photographs for it.
There's one publicity photograph.
Yeah. And it piqued my interest. But,
it did.
But at the same time, it's like, are we a bit Star Wars now? And it needs to be... It needs to be completely different from the Star Wars universe that we know. It has to be a completely different retake, I think. Kind of like where Star Trek Discovery went. It's so off tangent, and it has to be interesting. It has to be character based for me. That's where I think Star Wars has gone wrong a little bit, is in terms of the characters and so on. And certainly the original films, that's what it was all about. You know, it was about character. It was about the people that you were on a journey with. I think Star Wars lost the way with the new trilogy there. I mean, The Last Jedi was just diabolical.
Yeah, apparently we're all a bunch of Russian bots.
Seemingly. What I'm getting at is this has to be different. It has to be a hit out straight out. Otherwise, it's not good for Star Wars.
Yeah. No, I don't think I'm Star Warsed out. I'm just sick of crap Star Wars stuff. Yeah. When it's done well, like for example Rebels, I'm all there, gangbusters. You know, there were bells on. I thoroughly enjoyed that series, and I think it finished with a really emotional high. I thought it was superb. I'm interested in a new series coming out, Resistance, because again Dave Filoni's involved, and the animation style looks different and interesting, and it might hopefully fill in some gaps in terms of what the hell.
And it's getting good buzz. It's getting good buzz from the fans.
And hopefully it'll fill in some gaps about who the First Order are, and fill in the stuff we don't know from the films. But if this looks like it might be interesting, because as you say, the photograph that they've released, the image looks cool. Jon Faverau is a guy that I trust. I think he did a great job with Iron Man, for example. So I trust him to deliver something. And if it's new and it's original and it's fresh and it's got nothing to do with all the other stuff, and it shouldn't do because it's set after Jedi, before The Force Awakens. So in that period, set in the outer reaches of the galaxy. It's called The Mandalorian. It involves a Mandalorian, I guess. It looks like it could be interesting.
Brilliant deduction there, Steve. I mean, top notch.
Yeah. Well, you never know. Maybe it doesn't. Maybe that's a trick. But yeah, if they do something new and original and different, and given it's a TV series, clearly there'll be limits in terms of budget, so they're going to have to be more imaginative and have more characterization and better stories,
and they have time
paper over the lack of money, and they've got time to take their time and do stuff. So it's got potential, and I'm definitely looking forward to this. I think it's next year, isn't it? When it arrives next year, so
yeah,
we'll see.
Yeah, we'll see on that one. Because it's kind of strange this year because all we've had is Solo, and then we don't have anything now until episode 9.
Yeah, that's probably a good thing.
And which is what I was going to say. I think that is a good thing. I think we need to. Yeah, there needs to be a passage of time there just for people to get.
But I don't think it's necessarily Star Wars fatigue. I know people have been saying that about Solo. I think it's people who hated The Last Jedi as the end of the story. That's the simple reason. People are just, that's a bad taste in my mouth. It's going to take a long time for it to go away. By the end of next year, I should be probably happy to go and see episode 9. But right now, I've got no interest in it.
Yeah, I'm very much with you on that one, and I think the podcast listeners know that as well.
Yeah.
Right, so moving on, we did mention, I mentioned that I thought Waterworld had been a box office bomb, but seemingly not, but Hudson Hawk was. So in honour of that, Steve's given us a wiki list of the biggest box office bombshells, and we've to pick our favourites out of this. And I'm struggling to find stuff that I actually like that have been so far. I can hang on, Blade Runner 2049.
Yeah, that's on the list.
That's on the list, as is Solo.
Oh yeah, Solo is
yeah.
massive hit, massive loss.
Yeah, so for me, if it's been classed as a disaster, I don't think it was a disaster. Probably a disaster at the box office, but I think it's a really accomplished piece of work. It's long. It takes its time. It's a definite slow burner, but I just think
you're talking about Blade Runner here.
Blade Runner, 2049. Yes, I'm talking about that. I think it's a masterpiece. It looks beautiful. The amount of time and care that's been taken with it, the acting performances, the story, the fact that it's a continuation of the original, but it's done in such a fantastic way. I thoroughly love that film to bits. I really do. So yeah, it might have been a box office bomb, and a lot of that will come down to the fact that it was such a long movie and such a slow burner. People walked out the screening that I was in when I went to see it in the cinema. Yeah, because they obviously got bored and walked out. But yeah, for me, I think it's just an absolute genius piece of work. I think it works more on disc format at home, where you can take your time with it.
And drink
and go to the loo and not miss anything, because you can pause it. That assumes you live on your own, by the way.
Absolutely.
I'm going to have a quick look through the list. Mark, anything caught your eye?
Yes. I'm right at the top of the list. The 13th Warrior, John McTiernan.
Quite enjoyable.
I quite enjoyed it too.
No, I really like it. I think. Sorry, can you hear that banging?
Yeah.
Yes.
What are you doing?
No, it's next door's knocking down a shed.
All right, keep going.
We'll live.
We'll live.
Right. Yeah, I think once you get past, there's an early kind of montage sequence where Antonio Banderas kind of learns the Norsemen's language just by listening to them for a couple of minutes in montage time. Once you get past that, it's got bloody battles. It's got kind of a bit of mystery, a bit of a cult, and I'm kind of quite surprised that it was a flop, because I just think it's enjoyable hokum. I really liked it.
Isn't it more that it cost £1 bajillion to make?
Yeah,
how it costs that much is.
I don't get that. You
is
see
it
the
eyeliner for Antonio Banderas.
Well, no, but I mean the sets really aren't. They're not that big. By kind of fantasy standards, I just can't quite see why it cost such a huge amount. But I still think it's a pretty slick film. As is, I have to say, also on the list, 80s fantasy hokum Krull.
Yeah, that was a favourite of mine when I was.
I liked Krull too when I was a kid, even though it's absolute crap.
Yeah, absolutely.
It really is crap.
But as a youngster, you don't see it that way, do you? Another one that pointed out there, and I think it's a really, really nice animation at the time, and it had quite a voice cast as well, and that was Titan AE.
You see, I do like that film, and I thought it in visual terms it was impressive.
Yeah.
Soundtrack's dated horribly.
You mean in terms of the music?
Yeah.
Yeah, because it was a demo disc for a long time.
Oh, yeah, well, it had a full bitrate TTS.
It did,
back when all this was all very exciting, and those ice crystal things, But the actual music was entirely of the moment for about 8 minutes in 2000 and whatever. It fell apart quite quickly. But, in some regards, that film was interesting because it did some of the things that Star Wars was proceeding to forget about. It was a world in space of sort of grimy, worn-out stuff that didn't always work very well.
Yeah.
And it was a lesson hard won and apparently easily forgotten. That would have been on my list as well. I'm ashamed to say there's actually quite a few films on this I quite like.
Okay, well hit us with a few then, Ed.
Sahara.
I like Sahara.
Principally
That's
because
one of the biggest losers of all time.
Well, isn't it mainly because they shot it twice, and because Clive Cussler is a massive arsehole? So there's nothing wrong with Sahara, but it could never make the money back that it cost to produce. Was it listed here? 160 million to make Sahara, and that's just not gonna work. And then there was something further up the list. There's Hard Rain, which it's just awful but brilliant. I love that film.
Yeah, I like Hard Rain too.
And there was.
This is going into a list of guilty pleasures now, though, isn't it?
Yeah, quickly.
I've got to.
Well, no, Sahara. The thing is, if Sahara had been made for the amount of money it should have cost, it by any standard reckoning, it did perfectly okay. It just simply because of the nature of how much it cost to do. It could never win. Titan AE, obviously, we've spoken about. And there was something else that's leapt out. I actually quite enjoyed the Guy Ritchie Man from U.N.C.L.E. thing as well.
Too.
I thought that was a perfectly satisfactory piece of filmmaking. But again, it's just stuff that seems to be mysteriously expensive in terms of what you see on screen versus how much it costs to do. And all of these films, it's essentially going into the fight with one hand tied behind your back.
What was The Good Dinosaur, Steve? 2015.
That was Pixar, one of Pixar's few bombs.
Right. Well, it cost between 175 million and 200 million.
Yeah,
and visually, you can see where some of the money's gone. It's just unfortunately bolted to a film where they, unusually for Pixar, they missed the emotional.
Yeah, I got halfway through it and I haven't finished it. I still haven't finished it because I just turned off because I do something else, and it wasn't very good.
Right.
Interesting to note that there's another crap submarine film on here, K-19.
Yeah, maybe the reason why they haven't been doing too many submarine films recently.
And if you've got Jack in the title, you're not doing very well either.
It's interesting. There are some films on here which are recognisably terrible. I mean, obviously that Ben Affleck and Jennifer Lopez thing. Yeah, I mean that's proper bollocks, isn't it? But there's other things where it's just they're doomed to be indifferent. I don't have strong feelings about most of the films on this list. They're just non-entities that burn through a huge amount of money. Although Gerard Butler has done quite well in the list of the films.
Yeah, go back to my statement about he needs a new agent, doesn't he?
I mean, there are. I mean, obviously, the one that stands. I mean, have any of you watched Battlefield Earth?
No.
Nope.
Because it's supposed. I mean, I do want to know if it's worth devoting to. I mean, if it's hilariously bad, I would be quite tempted to, spend a bit of time watching it. But if it's just indifferently shit, then there's other things to be
looking
doing.
at the list is an interesting because there's stuff in there that was famously over budget. Things like Adventures of Baron Munchausen. Everyone remembers the stories of that going over budget, and losing a lot of money.
Heaven's Gate.
I like Baron Munchausen. Heaven's Gate obviously is the classic example. Adjusted for inflation, apparently it lost 120 million. But again, I actually quite like the film. What I'm amazed is how many modern films, recent films that I've seen and didn't realise that they had lost something like Allied, which was Robert Zemeckis' most recent film. It's dropped nearly 100 million. Alice Through the Looking Glass bombed. You've been to realise that these films are costing so much money to make.
Yeah.
So I think it's interesting when you see these recent films that I didn't realise were actual bombs, that you realise how much they cost, and then how much is spent on marketing them. So if a film costs 200 million. With marketing, you need to make at least 400 million just to break even. And suddenly a film, that you thought was a hit actually drops, a couple of 100 million at the box office. And I mean, some of the films like John Carter, I've got to say, I actually quite enjoyed John Carter. But when it costs 263 million to make,
you're off to an impossible start.
Particularly when you change the title from John Carter of Mars because you didn't want to mention the word Mars, because if you look a bit further down the list, Disney had already had a massive bomb with Mars Needs Mums, which had dropped 157 million at the box office. But unfortunately for them, John Carter then went and dropped quite possibly.
I was going to say, I think
million.
Yeah, they had to kind of probably like double or triple the advertising budget just to try and convince people that John Carter, wasn't just some story about a bloke starring Tom Hanks or something.
Yeah, it's like the most boring title they could possibly come up with. But it's interesting that Justice League's on there, so that's dropped 800 million. So there's that particular. DC have obviously got problems there.
There is another bomb. I've just gone off peak because I wanted to check. There's a film that's not on the list, but it is undoubtedly bomb because a budget of 50 million, it returned 23. I have a massive soft spot for Toys. The Robin Williams thing. It's not a good film, and many parts of it are terrible, but it just looks so fabulous that I can forgive it large swathes of that. But yeah, I mean, it's all over the place tonally, and it lost $27 million. So I think it counts in terms of bombing. So yeah, just wanted to put that one in there as well. And that's a classic. And that's, I would argue, if going back to what you were saying there, Steve, that's a proper bomb where it's not, doomed by enormous marketing costs. It simply cost a reasonable sum of money to make and then didn't make anything like that back.
Yeah.
That's old school bombing.
I mean, I was amazed that Hugo's dropped to 100 million. I didn't know that was a bomb. I thought that did quite well. Tomorrowland, another film I quite like.
But Tomorrowland cost so much money. Again, it was doomed, and again, it's weirdly all over the place, isn't it? In terms of
Horizon dropped a ton of money. I mean, there's some real, there's stuff in here that you just know about. The Cotton Club, everyone knows that was a disaster. The Chronicles of Riddick dropped a ton of money. Stuff that I'm not surprised that Ben-Hur remake bombed. But it's interesting that I mean, Alexander. I like Alexander. I know he tried doing it. I've got 4 different versions of that film, but that didn't do very well, unfortunately. But the other stuff like The Adventures of Pluto Nash, I mean, that's a famous disaster that pretty much finished Eddie Murphy's career. 47 Ronin. That's a film I quite enjoyed at the cinema, but
it's pretty,
but load of money.
Come on, Steve, it's terrible.
So yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? It shows you how high risk it is now, though. If you're talking about big budget tentpole movies, the investments are so enormous that if it goes wrong, I mean, I don't know. Obviously, Hollywood accounting is notorious. You might find that studios deliberately write off a lot more on a particular film because it suits them from a tax perspective, but yeah, you can see that the massive risks that are being taken by the studios now in terms of the budgets on these films. I mean, how the films have gone. Remember when Heaven's Gate bombed back in 1980, and it cost 44 million, which was a lot of dough in 1980. But even adjusting for inflation, that's nothing like the numbers that are being spent on films now, where films are routinely costing up to $300 million. The inflation within film budgets has just gone off the scales.
We were actually unusually prescient about this. We were discussing this over 4 years ago, when what was the terrible thing with Johnny Depp, the Lone Ranger.
I was going to say you're going to have to narrow it down these days.
Yeah, well, no, absolutely, touche. But we were pointing out that essentially, with these escalating budgets, it was a case that we were running very close to everything exists on a razor's edge, and your propensity to lose an absolute metric ton of money grew exponentially as these risks grow. And it's this list seems to just demonstrate that you don't have to have a proper turkey for it still to be an absolute financial rinsing.
Yeah, I mean, if this is to be believed, the Lone Ranger may have dropped up to $200 million, which is staggering. Interestingly, quite a lot of the films on this list, the recent films on this list, have lost a lot of money. Things like The Lone Ranger, The Good Dinosaur, Solo, John Carter, are all Disney productions. And I guess that's the only reason why it hasn't affected the industry as much as it might have, is because Disney, you're making so much money in other areas that they can afford the odd bomb like this. Because, if you look at this year, for example, they pulled in $2 billion from Infinity War, $1.5 billion from Black Panther, $1.5 billion from Incredibles 2. So they can afford a few bombs. They don't really care. But I think another studio, a less solvent studio, if they've had one of these bombs, it would finish them off.
Yeah. But it's just as that. I think sooner or later there's going to have to be some sort of reckoning as to why. Why costs have ballooned to this point, because it does mean that certain categories of film that I'm actually quite fond of are just they broadly speaking just don't seem to be able to exist anymore. I mean, one that just lurking innocuously on there, The Finest Hours. I watched that for some reason. I think it cropped up on Sky Movies, and it's a really nice. I thought it was a really good little film, but when the words "good little film" and a budget of $80 million, they're not compatible. It's one of those things where you don't know how it can ever be a success, costing that much money.
One of these things is, or certainly one of the things I noticed recently was that for the first time in about 20 odd years, numbers are going down for cinemas in terms of ticket sales and so on. There's always been a steady growth in that area, only a few percent, but it's always gone up. For the first time in a long time, it's now seriously going down. You've got the fact that nowadays you could lose your studio on a bad bet. You can see why people are not taking risks. You can see why we're getting sequels. We're looking at franchises that need to be built up proven to make money. And it's getting to the point now where it's just absolute stupidity when you're looking at the figures that are being bandied around in terms of production costs and all the rest of it. And just to make that money back as well. You're getting to the point now where it's going to be impossible to make that money back.
What's interesting is that you're not seeing, though, the big stories of kind of unrest on set with a lot of these turkeys. Like it used to be, a massive bomb would be like, like with Heaven's Gate and kind of stories of, kind of locking yourself in an editing suite or, trying to get away from the film producers because you've gone massively over budget. These are just kind of films that have failed to hit their mark and have just kind of spiraled out of control. And it's, there's nothing kind of, there's no kind of huge drama to it. It's just kind of almost like poor planning and poor accounting.
Steve, what do they call it in financial circles where you get the bubble bursting and so on? Is it a correction or a reset or
a financial correction?
Right.
Or a bubble bursting. Either is applicable. Perfectly applicable in this situation. I mean, this is an inflationary bubble in terms of budgets. But we've been saying for a few years now, that at some point it's going to have to collapse. But what's happening, and this is you were talking about cinema tendencies going down, and I think a part of that you have to look at today or this week. Netflix just on their platform have just added 22 July, the new Paul Greengrass film.
Yep.
And that's on Netflix. And that's a film I'm interested in seeing. Interesting, challenging material. You're not going to see that at the cinema anymore. What's happening is that the cinema's just full of all this big budget
noise.
Yes, schlock, franchise stuff, comic book movies. That's always coming out at the cinema. And then what you're getting else on other platforms, particularly streaming platforms, is the challenging stuff, the interesting stuff. I mean, the new Alfonso Cuarón film, Roma, that's coming on Netflix in December. So the stuff I'm looking forward to, a lot of it, or stuff I'm looking forward to, isn't even coming to the cinema anymore. So
does this have any similarities to what happened in the early 80s with VHS and Betamax and the video nasties and all the rest of it? And people were more interested in sitting at home and watching movies, and cinema attendances went way down. And then we saw the resurgence of cinema in the late 80s, early 90s, more in the 90s, with multiplexes, new technology, new sound formats, all that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Do you see that happening again? Or are we at a place now where the cinema will be lucky to survive because of technology?
The 80s, it was obviously the advent of VHS, so people could watch stuff at home. And if you actually look at the attendance numbers for the 80s, cinema was a gnat's hair away from going down. I mean, the tendencies just went through the floor in the mid-80s. People were not going to the cinema at all. And you're right, Phil, they combated that by improving the experience, because also cinemas in the 80s were shit, weren't they? Real flea pit.
Yeah, absolutely.
They improved the experience. They built the multiplexes, the nice seating, all the concessionary stands, the food. They improved the experience, the better picture quality, sound quality. Everything was better. So there was a reason to go to cinema, because you got a better experience than you did at home. What we're getting now is the impact of particularly Netflix, but not just Netflix, but the Netflix effect, where you can see stuff just as good at home. But what's the problem that cinema's got now is that the experience at home is as good as, and in some respects better than the experience at cinema. So you don't get the massive screen, obviously, and IMAX is trying to combat things to a certain extent with that. But I think that cinema could be in real trouble, because we're starting to move towards, and from the point of view of a studio, it makes great sense, right? Simultaneous release, cinema, streaming, everything all at the same time. Because the faster you can get your money back, particularly when you've just spent $200 million making the film, the faster you get your money back, the less you've got to pay an interest on the loans to make the film in the first place. So it's yes, I think cinema over the next decade could really struggle.
It has to change.
Also,
it has to evolve. Again.
The other pinch point, of course, is that decent plot and the space to actually get things done is moving to serialized television. With things like Game of Thrones, where they've got a decent budget, they're producing stuff that's cinema quality, isn't it? Cinema quality images, but with storylines and adult themes that you're just never going to get in the cinema. If you spend $300 million, you can't have a PG. You got to have a PG-13 rating, haven't you? You've got to, otherwise you're not going to make your money back.
Well, look at Amazon's, Jack Ryan. I mean, the production values there.
Yeah, that was a movie. That was a movie, wasn't it?
That was a movie. That was absolutely a movie.
Was absolutely a movie. And they've just spent $200 million on the rights to Lord of the Rings. That's going to be, obviously, by its very nature, going to have to be cinematic and expensive. So
can we be clear on this? I'm not going to see First Man this evening because I'm staying in to watch the Great Model Railway Challenge on Channel 5. So it's
always at the cutting edge, Ed.
The writing is on the wall,
and on
a tiny wall.
And on that tiny bombshell, That's it for this week. My thanks to Steve Withers.
It's getting late. I could use a drink.
Ed Selley.
Bastard. I feel like a goldfish.
And Mark Botwright.
Please stop it. Stop it now.
Don't forget, don't forget, you can follow us on Twitter and Facebook. Bookmark AVForums.
Sorry, I was gonna say, if you can guess what that film was, you're going to get a prize.
Okay, Steve's providing a prize if you can guess that. Answers in the thread below this video on YouTube
That's
or
the postcard.
Saucy postcard. Right. Don't forget, you can follow us on Twitter and Facebook, bookmark AVForums for latest reviews, news and videos, and of course leave us a 5-star rating on iTunes, but only if you enjoyed the show. I'm Phil Hinton. Thank you very much for listening, and we'll see you again next week.